In 1790, when our nation was new, the government took its first census. Only 5% of the population then lived in cities. 1 out of 20 in a nation of 4 million. Today, 80% of our people live in cities. 4 out of 5 in a nation grown to over 200 million. Why were people attracted to cities? The towns and cities of pre-industrial America were small and sparse, gems of gentility, built for the elite of their time. City jobs for workers in those days were like farm jobs, simple manual labor. Then the Industrial Revolution brought factories to the cities. The industrial city rapidly became a place of productive labor. Most productive work was factory work. The only people who wore white collars in those days were the men who owned businesses, along with a few clerks. The need for labor beckoned to European immigrants, and in multitudes they came, the largest mass migration the world had ever seen. Between 1890 and the 1930s, 22 million immigrants landed on these shores. There was work in our cities in those days, much of it menial and dirty. Loading and unloading goods, hauling ashes, cleaning up after horses. And factory work. The factories had work for the skilled and unskilled alike. It was hard in this land of opportunity, but still they came because, after all, the jobs were there, in the cities. By modern standards, these cities were small. Most immigrants, when they first arrived, lived close to their work and close to their fellow countrymen from the old world. The fancy and glamorous areas of the city were usually just around the corner from the slums where most immigrants lived. Downtown was an area people could easily walk to if they wanted. Most newcomers to the city were able to adapt to city life because that life was all around them. Today, the big migration from Europe is over. But a new migration has taken its place, almost as big as the first. A migration from America itself. Since the 1940s, almost 20 million rural refugees have left the American countryside and headed for the cities. And this migration continues. Why do they come? There was a time when American agriculture needed many workers. Cotton used to be cultivated and picked by hand, but not since the 1940s. Cotton is now handled efficiently by machine. Machines have revolutionized agriculture. This new tobacco harvester can replace as many as 50,000 unskilled laborers. Not only on the farm, but across the land, machines have replaced men. Great strip mining shovels now displace coal miners, indirectly sending even more unskilled labor into our cities. Pushed off the land by new developments in technology, blacks and whites alike have been made rural refugees. Without jobs, without hope, they migrate to the city to look for work that often will not be there. For the cities to which they come, like the countryside they departed, have changed. The lure of the city is still here, but here too, technology is bringing revolutionary changes. Industry is here, but modern factories call for a new breed of worker. Today's factories require fewer workers at a higher level of skill than before. Machines have replaced hands. Many automated factories hum unattended, except for a few highly trained operators. More and more, complicated machines take over the routine jobs. As a result, in most large cities today, there are fewer and fewer jobs for the unskilled workers who made city life hum in the old days. Instead of the production worker, cities now depend more and more on another kind of worker, the service or white-collar worker. These new office buildings in the inner city were designed for row upon row of service employees, not factory workers. Over 60% of the labor force today is engaged in performing services. Less than 40% work at the production of goods. And what does this mean for the unskilled rural refugee? He brings his willing hands to the changing city, only to find the unemployment he left behind. Once their productive labor had a place, but no longer. But still they come, crowding into the cities, swelling the ranks of the unemployed, and indirectly stimulating another migration. The movement of prosperous city dwellers out from the central city to the suburbs. This is what is happening. Today's city has grown upward and outward, beyond the old city lines. Thanks to the automobile, cities continue to grow at the outer edges, to the horizon and beyond. As a city grows, it expands along its lines of transportation, railroads, transit lines, highways. Major highways now cut through and encircle most cities, determining how they will grow. Railroads were once the major carriers of products and people in and out of cities. Railroads are still part of the urban landscape. But cities today depend on other means of transportation. Most freight now is handled by trucks in and around cities. A majority of commuters travel by automobile. The modern city is in fact dramatically shaped by the automobile. Over 30% of urban space is now devoted to moving and parking cars. Every major city has its superhighways that lead away from the center to the suburbs, to the ring of outer city life that circles the inner city. The suburban outer city is indeed the creation of the automobile. More of the urban population today is concentrated in the outer city's suburbs than in our inner cities. The census figures tell the story. 76 million now live in the outer cities, 64 million in the inner cities. But the inner city is still here, its business areas bright and modern, rising higher and higher. The centers of finance and commerce are here. The cultural resources of the city hold great fascination. Some prefer the tempo of city life. The inner city, for many, is still the place to live. Life in the inner city offers a richness and variety of human experience found nowhere else. But just beyond the business and luxury areas are the less glamorous parts of the city, along with the neighborhoods we call slums and ghettos. As more and more rural refugees move into these poor areas of the inner city, More and more prosperous inhabitants move to the richer outer city. These once elegant houses, located near the center of the city, are now part of the city's problem of poverty. Business and industry also move away from the inner city, often to relocate in the outer city. And as those trained for work in the service industries move farther out to the city's fringe, taking with them their taxable income and skills, there are fewer who remain in the inner city to set the standards of improvement and carry the burden of taxes. This increasing number of city dwellers, ill prepared for modern city life, with little chance for adjustment, leads to frustration, despair, violence, and crime. Those unpleasant realities that drive more and more of the skilled and prosperous away from the city's core. Who takes care of those who are unemployed? Government does by providing costly welfare services. Thus, the labor saved in the countryside by labor-saving machinery creates the need for more labor in the offices of city government. Demands on inner city services continue to rise, while at the same time the tax monies for these services do not grow to match. Police, fire protection, sanitation, the need for better housing and schools, the increasing needs of city government. Who will pay for these services? How can we plan our changing cities to serve the needs of people? Tear down the old, make room for the new. The old neighborhoods disappear. In their place, structures like these. High-rise apartments for the rich. High-rise public housing for the poor. Which serves the needs of people better? These massive buildings with barren spaces between? Or a street like this, alive with social contact? Which provides a richer human experience? The hustling tempo of the inner city? Or the isolation of the suburbs? The modern city is the most complex social environment inhabited by man. Has it become too complex? People everywhere are concerned.
What don't we want?
Never before have the conditions within our cities created more frustration and demands. Richer on the outside, poorer on the inside. Must our inner cities become giant reservations for the poor and unskilled? How will the people of our inner and outer cities work together to reach common goals and understanding? Our answers to these questions will determine the future of our cities.